The Chalice of Gods is the first book in an upcoming trilogy of the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan. It takes place around the same time as the Hidden Oracle from the Trials of Apollo series, and this is pretty much Rick Riordan's most recent book. In this video, I'll review and break down this book for you guys. Since this is Rick's most recent release, I'll have to give a spoiler warning for many books in the Riordanverse, namely PJO, Heroes of Olympus, and Trials of Apollo. So with that, let's get into it. First of all, I know this review is pretty much long overdue. I was just too caught up with other video ideas before I made this one, but here it is, and here are my thoughts on the Chalice of Gods. I'd rate it about a 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't really know what to expect with this book, so I didn't really think I'd like it as much as I do right now. So, the basic premise of the Chalice of Gods was that it'll follow Percy and Annabeth navigating their senior year in high school, and that Percy needed recommendation letters from the gods by doing quests for them to enroll in New York College. This leads him to quite an adventure, and let's talk about it. One of the main things I missed about the Riordanverse since the release of the Trials of Apollo, or even The Sun and the Star and other recent Riordanverse side books, was Percy's perspectives. I mean, sure, we got a bit of it from the Heroes of Olympus, but it just didn't feel the same because of the new third-person writing style that Rick decided to make in that series. In the Chalice of Gods, though, it was written in the classic first-person perspective that Rick excels in, and it felt like rereading the original PJO books, which was very nostalgic to read about. I love that we got to get back to Percy's internal monologue and sarcasm in the many events of this book, and the humor in this book is so on point. Like, I loved every bit of it. Speaking of the nostalgia aspect for the OG 5 PJO books, I especially felt that with the many references to that series in this book, and it felt really good to see Percy look back on the old quests that he did around the age of 12 when he's currently 17. It gives you a bit of a shocker that Percy really grew so much. I mean, the guy's going to college in a couple of months, and it's insane. And now let's talk about a new character we get in this book, Ganymede. Ganymede is the cupbearer of the gods, and his chalice has been stolen. He promises Percy that he'll sign Percy's recommendation letter if Percy helps him find the thief of the chalice. This plot is pretty much giving the lightning thief all over again, but this time, Percy and the gang are all grown up, and it made me miss more quests with just Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the new and other characters we get like the Seven from the Heroes of Olympus, or the new characters from the Trials of Apollo, but Percy, Annabeth, and Grover are just the old trio that started it all, so it hit harder when I realized that they're going back together and going to tackle a new adventure. So, this adventure ended up being with the former cupbearer Hebe, and I found it hilarious that Rick made Hebe into this goddess selling pizza to boomers in an arcade called Heebie-Jeebies. Like, that was the last thing I expected here, as I thought it was gonna be a bit more serious. And I guess that aspect of just light, fun adventure is what really pulled me into this book, because it gave me a bit of a break from all the heartbreaking and betrayal scenes that happens in an average Riordanverse book. Like, I'm telling you, all throughout, the vibes of the book were just so light, and the stakes weren't even that high. Everything was pretty much told in a comical and light way, even though Percy was about to die in some fight scenes, and it was hilarious to read about. Speaking of fight scenes, I guess I have to mention the fight Percy had with the snakes and Ellison, because that was hilarious. Ellison made Percy clean the ocean, and once Percy did it, we met Ellison having tea with Annabeth. Like, what kind of side plot was that? But I loved it. Percy even questions Annabeth like, bro, did you just bring tea to a quest? And Annabeth is like, yeah, I did. Like, yeah, that was hilarious. Something I didn't expect though about this book was Grover and Percy opening up. I mean, they've been best friends since they were 12. Like, obviously they would talk like this, but something I didn't expect was the fact that they were talking about relationship advice for Grover and Grover's girlfriend Juniper. Juniper as a character in the Riordanverse was just someone I kept forgetting because Rick didn't give that much importance to her relationship with Grover. Grover doesn't really bring her up as much, and I sometimes forget that Grover has a girlfriend. But either way, it broke my heart to think that they were having a bit of miscommunication issues because Juniper thinks that Grover was cheating on her with the daughter of Iris named Blanche. Blanche is a new character, and I like that she's a daughter of Iris because we need more representation from children of the minor gods, and I wonder what will happen to her in the later books. Anyway though, Grover and Percy opening up was a sweet scene. From there, I think another highlight of this book was the fight Percy had with Gary. Side note, I love the SpongeBob reference that Percy gives about Gary, because that was my initial thought too when it was revealed that the big baddie of this book was going to be named Gary. Like, isn't that the cartoon snail? But anyway, Gary or Garrus in Greek mythology was someone I actually recognized because I remembered him from the Greek myth of Hercules. Basically, Hercules fought Gary and ultimately won because Hercules was just a hella powerful demigod apparently, and they wrestled to a standstill. Gary was forced to surrender, but overall, it's pretty much impossible to defeat Gary because not all people are as strong as Hercules. So this made Percy question whether or not he should even push his chances with the guy. He ended up doing it anyway though, and Percy was pretty much outmatched because Gary was a very strong fighter. It leads up to Percy hugging Gary, and I want to talk about the scene. Percy's main motivation for hugging Gary was because Gary represented the god of old age, and he ultimately realized that he should embrace old age instead of fight it because old age was inevitable, yet something everybody feared. I can't really explain it, but it was a really sweet moment, especially since the memory that prompted Percy into doing that was because he remembered Jason Grace from the Blood of Olympus. A moment that goes completely unnoticed by fans is when Jason imagines a future where he and Piper grew old together and had kids, and when Percy remembers this, he thinks to himself that he wants that future with Annabeth and that he wants to grow old with her, which is just so sweet. So ultimately, Percy hugs Gary, which signifies that he wants to get to that old age with Annabeth, which is why he embraced Gary or old age in a metaphorical sense of acceptance. Gary felt so touched by this that he literally gave back the chalice, and from there, the day was saved. Overall, this book had great moments. I love that we got to see Mount Olympus again to return the chalice to Ganymede, and like I mentioned earlier, it had a light and fun vibe to it. And now I'll be answering the question, was this book needed? Though I went to this book with the same question in my head, I have to say it's proved its worth. It had great moments with the OG trio, and it felt great to be in Percy's shoes again. I also like the many Percabeth moments we had, and the fact that this book takes place around the same time as the Trials of Apollo. We were able to get a glimpse into what Percy, Annabeth, and Grover were going through around this part in the Ryanverse timeline, which we weren't able to do with the Trials of Apollo because it was always in Apollo's POV. We were also able to see how Percy reacted to Sally being pregnant with his baby sister, and it was another hilarious scene to read about. We also saw how Percy and Annabeth were so caught up in schoolwork, which they never really experienced in the previous books because of the constant danger they were in. So it really felt nice to see that they were just enjoying themselves as teenagers. Overall though, I love this book and I'm so glad I got to read it. So how about you? What are your thoughts on this book? Let me know in the comments down below.